If we evolved from monkeys, how come monkeys don't become humans anymore? Well, I don't know. Maybe they don't put as much effort and don't work as much anymore. Maybe they're just more lazy. Okay.
Back then, little 8-9-year-old me was a little confused as I didn't get a certain answer. As I grew up, however, I instead came to realize just how uneducated my primary school teacher was. What makes evolution such an interesting feat is that it is both a simple and yet an intricately complicated process in the same time. And as racist as he was, Darwin must have been at least somewhat intelligent to be able to figure out the theory of evolution. And that's way before genes were properly discovered. What even is the theory of evolution? Let's give a quick example. In this case, with lice. On your head, they just be chilling, sucking blood, and suddenly you put some anti-lice product. Now, almost all of them died. In fact, at the time, you thought that all of them did. However, some time passes by, and they return back to their original number. This time, even when you put the anti-lice product on, none of them actually went away. Well, congratulations. You now have lice which have evolved to be resistant. But what exactly happened? In the beginning, we had our original population of lice. Firstly, we have to note that just like humans, they're not all the same, like some Star Wars clones. Instead, each is slightly different to one another. This is known as variation. When you put the product on your head, one or maybe even more of the lice had resistance to the poison. How? Well, it was a result of a mutation, an error in the mechanism which would copy their genes when they were born. Before they were sprayed with the poison, it never really made a difference to them if they had this resistance or not, so only a few had them. But now that they were exposed, all of those without the resistance died away, and they couldn't reproduce again to pass on their lack of resistance to the next generation. Those with resistance, however, managed to survive and reproduce, and so they passed their resistance to their offspring. So now, since only those with resistance survived, the whole population becomes resistant. Now, it is possible that this mutation had occurred a long time ago in a distant relative to the lice on your head, and were just carried on. But it is also possible that the mutation occurred on your head itself, maybe even at the moment at which you sprayed them. There was this exact chosen one, which was born with a mutation. This is an example where outside pressure, in this case the poison, makes a certain characteristic to develop to the whole population, in this case the resistance. That said, characteristics can also develop without an outside pressure. If, for example, one of the lice happened to be born with a better shaped mouth, which allowed it to suck more blood, naturally, it will have more food and be able to breed more, and its offspring would too have a better mouth and will be able to have more food and likewise outcompete the rest of the lice. This cycle would repeat, and slowly the population would contain more and more of those lice with a better shaped mouth. With all that said, do take it with a grain of salt, as it is extremely simplified. In practice, there are many factors interacting with each other to result in the changes of evolution. Feel free to pause at this quick diagram for a greater insight. It feels like when we say monkeys, we imagine to be speaking about one and the same group of monkeys, without regarding the fact that there are many more different species of monkeys. And as if we evolved to become humans from one group, which are around today. So let's just swap the word monkeys with primates. This includes all the different species, including us. Firstly, we have to understand that evolution may not always sound logical to us. For example, if we have a group of two human tribes, one of them being skinny and small, where the other one having larger muscular people in it, you might come to think that the tribe with big and muscular people might be the stronger and more capable one to survive. But in practice, this tribe might actually face much greater need of food to maintain their bodies. And at a certain period of a food crisis, they will just get wiped out, while the other tribe only gets reduced in numbers. So how does that relate to our original question? Among other primates, one of the most closely related to humans is the chimpanzee, with whom we shared a common ancestor around 6 to 8 million years ago. What we need to do is imagine that we're back in time, around 7 million years ago, when neither our species nor the chimps existed yet, and this common ancestor was the only one to be. The population of this ancestor was spread around the world. It didn't just exist in one place. This meant that different pressures accumulated, and these are just the outside pressures, as I mentioned earlier. Consequently, it meant that different groups of the population of these ancestors would have come to adapt and change differently to account for the different pressures. From this, we can get to 3 conclusions. First, this common ancestor existed around 7 million years ago, so it took around 7 million years for it to change from what it was to what me and you are today. You can only imagine how many generations died and were born throughout this time. And with every generation, the changes were either non-existent or ever so small that one would never notice it, and the changes will only come apparent if you collect them along the millions of years. Second, the group which evolved into chimps did so in the same time as the group that evolved into humans. It was not one after the other. And third, the changes which occurred in these different groups are completely down to chance, as mutations are random. So when we got brains, it didn't mean that we evolved more than chimps. We just evolved differently. Our characteristics, our genes, simply adapted to handle with the pressures in a different way. If we came back to the example of the 2 tribes, we can now understand why some groups evolved into chimps and some into humans. There were simply different pressures which were dealt by different adaptations. 500,000 years ago, nobody could say that we were better than chimps. We were simply different. Today, however, when humans have conquered the planet, our differences seem so major that people come to think that we have evolved more than chimps, which we have not. We have just evolved differently, and one could argue that our changes were better, but still they're not in greater numbers, at least relatively speaking. If you take this case and apply it to all other primates today in relation to us, you can finally get the picture of our relation with the rest of the primate species. So, do monkeys still evolve into humans? Why are there still monkeys if we came from them? And why do they not turn into humans anymore? I hope you can now see what is wrong with all of these questions. The primates which are around today are not the primates which were around 5, 10, even 15 million years ago, and we did not evolve from these primates that exist today. So if we consider our ancient ancestors as monkeys, well, yes, we did evolve from monkeys, but they were different, and yes, they are no longer around, because they turned into what are today's primates. And in fact, it isn't just one particular ancient ancestor that turned into humans. Evolution is not some Pokemon game where today you're level 1 and tomorrow you're level 2. Those ancient ancestors are long dead. It is only their genes that remained into their offspring, and then their offspring passed it on, and occasionally, along that cycle, the genes changed ever so slightly through mutations, to result into the completely different beings that are today's primates over all of these millions of years. And you know what? I think this is quite exciting. While human evolution has been somewhat halted due to us figuring out ways to survive and reproduce, even in situations where we wouldn't normally make it in nature, other primates continue to evolve. Some species have already been observed to be going through their own stone ages. We may have only managed to observe this recently, but it is something that has been probably going on for thousands of years. As other primates continue to evolve, after tens or even hundreds of thousands of years, some of them might have the potential to develop greater intelligence, just like us. Could you imagine? What would it be to one day fully communicate with one of these future primates? Even if they don't turn into intelligent beings, the possibilities of the changes which would come to them with evolution are so great that our small human brain will never be able to figure out all of them on its own. And perhaps that's for the best. Maybe simply being astonished at the countless opportunities of the different ways in which these creatures could evolve is way better than actually seeing the change itself. Perhaps our ancestors would be amazed and extremely happy to just simply know that one day their grandsons will be the smart human beings that we are today. But unfortunately, just as they would be pleased to see our achievements and capabilities, they would cry and they would weep as they saw and continue to see the destruction that we lay onto everything around us. Our evolution should serve us as a powerful reminder of what we choose to do in life. For we are not only the product of billions of years of evolution, which, though a massive achievement by itself, it is also one that every other being has gone through, but we are also gifted by the slim to none chance of evolving to overcome our pressures through intelligence rather than just the sheer strength of our bodies. Our mind is like none other on this planet, and it will be such a pity to waste the opportunity to be alive today as a human being.